Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today because I want to do my book haul for the month of June. It is a big book haul. If you follow along, you know I've been trying to be a little more intentional with bringing books into my library this year, and I'm actually using my book haul revisits as a way of sort of honing in on what I'm likely to read. But June is an interesting month because it is my birthday month. And as a result, people tend to send me like gift cards, things like that. And I did decide to treat myself to another curated book box. And just for timing purposes or notes about that, doesn't really mean anything, but I am filming this on Monday because today ended up being a light day at the office. And I am trying to distract myself because Jamie, my little buddy in the chair over there, has surgery scheduled for Tuesday. So I'm trying to distract myself. And I am filming this video now, and I'm going to schedule it for later in the week. So the first thing I want to talk about is the curated book box that I did. And I wanted to try another one after I had so much success with the one that I did in the month of May from Good Neighbor Books in New York. I'll put a link to last month's book haul video in the description box down below if you would like to check it out. So I decided I wanted to give it another try, and because June is Pride Month, I wanted to get one from a queer-owned business, and I decided to do Betty's Pages, which is in Lowell, Michigan. I will put a link to their website in the description box down below so you can check that out. I did one of the same things that I did with the curated book box that I requested from Good Neighbor Books. I asked them to include a book that they think more people should talk about. It came with this lovely note thanking me for the order and saying which books they picked. So we'll get to the one that they picked for that prompt. But again, I will put a link to their website in the description box down below. And I apologize to Betty's Pages because I did not do an unboxing like I did for Good Neighbors bookstore, which again is going to be down there. This book came last week after we lost Guinness, and I really didn't feel like filming anything. I'm sure everybody can understand, but I didn't want to just leave the box unopened. So I opened it and I did get some joy from going through these books. So thank you, Betty's Pages, for the spot of joy in a very difficult week. I'm really excited to talk about these books. I think they did a fantastic job. And if you have ever been curious about curated book boxes, I have now had 2 good experiences with them. So the first book that they selected for me is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. This version is published by Vintage. This is a series of vignettes about the life of Esperanza Cordera, a young Latina girl figuring out who she is going to become as she grows up in Chicago. I have actually read this book before, but I had just started working at Borders and it was on summer reading lists. It was always on summer reading lists, but the first summer that I worked at Borders and was doing summer reading lists, multiple people recommended it to me and I read it and I remember liking it, but I don't remember the book very well. So I have always intended to go back and read it again, but I don't have a copy of it because I don't know what happened to the copy that I had then. It just vanished somewhere along the way. I've moved a couple of times since then. So even though I've already read it, it's perfect that it was included because it is something that I have wanted to reread and didn't really remember. So fantastic work. In my book hauls, I like to read a little bit of the opening just to give you a bit of an idea what each book is like. So we will do that with each of these books. The first chapter is The House on Mango Street. We didn't always live on Mango Street. Before that, we lived on Loomis on the 3rd floor, and before that, we lived on Keeler. Before Keeler, it was Paulina, and before that, I can't remember. But what I remember most is moving a lot. Each time, it seemed there'd be one more of us. By the time we got to Mango Street, we were 6. Mama, Papa, Carlos, Kiki, my sister Nenny, and me. The house on Mango Street is ours, and we don't have to pay rent to anybody or share the yard with the people downstairs or be careful not to make too much noise, and there isn't a landlord banging on the ceiling with a broom. But even so, it's not the house we thought we'd get. And that is the opening of The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. The next book from the curated book box from Betty's Pages is Fruit of the Drunken Tree by Ingrid Rojas Contreras. This is published by Anchor Books. And Fruit of the Drunken Tree follows 7-year-old Chula who lives in a gated community in Bogota Outside the walls of her neighborhood, drug lord Pablo Escobar is causing chaos in her country, and the outside world becomes real for Chula when her mom hires a live-in maid named Petrona, who has come to this home from a slum to try to support her own family. And that sounds really interesting. I've heard good things about it. I just had never gotten around to reading it, so maybe this will give me the kick in the pants that I need to finally get around to doing that. The first chapter is called The Photograph. She sits in a plastic chair in front of a brick wall, slouching. She is meek with her hair parted down the middle. There are almost no lips to be seen, but by the way she bares her teeth, you can tell she is smiling. At first, the smile seems flat, but the more I study it, the more it seems careless and irresponsible. There is a bundle in her arms and a hole for the newborn's face, which comes out red and wrinkled like an old person's. I know it is a boy because of the blue ribbon woven into the blanket edge. Then I stare at the man behind Petrona. He is afroed and striking, weighing his cursed hand on her shoulder. I know what he's done, and it turns my stomach. But who am I to say whom Petrona should allow into a family portrait such as this? And that is the opening of Fruit of the Drunken Tree by Ingrid Rojas Contreras. There are 3 more that come from the curated book box. The next one is the one that Nicole, who owns Betty's Pages, had selected as a book that they wish more people would talk about. It is Blackout. It has various authors: Danielle Clayton, Tiffany Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. It is published by Quill Tree Books. And the premise of it is that when a summer heat wave causes a black wave, these 6 authors tell stories about 6 couples dealing with secrets, potential romance, and trying to get to the biggest block party of the year and all the things that they discover in between. It sounds really interesting. I'm very much looking forward to giving this a try. The first chapter is called The Long Walk, Act 1 by Tiffany D. Jackson. Harlem, 5:12 p.m. It's a heat stroke kind of day, one where bad stuff happens. Tensions matching the temperature make people do stupid things in a city full of millions. On days like this, you would not catch me dead outside. I'd be huddled in my room next to the air conditioner, streaming movies with an iced tea and a turkey on wheat. So when the train doors open on the hot-ass platform, blowing sticky air in my face, I have second thoughts about the new job. And that is how Blackout, by various authors, opens. Really looking forward to that. Then we have Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Pèrez, which kind of immediately grabbed my attention because it has this Prince medal or Prince honor sticker on it. And that's a fairly reliable indicator of quality in young adult books or independent reader books. This one seems like it would be young adult. And that got me a little bit excited. The only one that gets me more excited is the Stonewall Award sticker, because that one has never let me down yet. I'm sure at some point it will, but good indicator of quality. This is published by Holiday House and set in 1937 Texas. Out of Darkness uses the backdrop of a real disaster as the framework for a story about segregation, love, and destruction, and it sounds really interesting. The back of the book does not have much of a description, and when you look it up online, you get just pretty much that bare bones thing that I read, but it sounds like a really intriguing story, and I'm looking forward to it. So it opens with a prologue. New London, Texas, March 18, 1937. From far off, it looks like hundreds of beetles ringed around a single dome of light. Then the shiny black backs resolve into pickups and cars and ambulances. The bright globe divides into many lights: work lamps, spotlights, strings of Christmas bulbs, stadium floodlights borrowed from the football field nearby, men and dust and tents. Thousands of spectators gather, necks craned, but it is not a circus, not a rodeo. Within the great circle of light, men crawl over the crumpled form of a collapsed school. They cart away rubble and search for survivors, for their children. Mostly, though, they find bodies. Bits of bodies. They gather these pieces in peach baskets that they pass from hand to hand, not minding their torn gloves, torn skin. They say nothing of the stench. That's a brutal opening for potentially a brutal book, but it sounds like it will be really interesting, and I am looking forward to it, and I'm grateful that Betty's Pages put it on my radar. The final book that was in the book box I ordered from Betty's Pages is Aquarium by Yaara Shehori. It is published by FSG, and this sounds fascinating. So Lily and Dory are deaf sisters being raised by deaf parents in a way that rejects traditional hearing society, Practically feral, the sisters are forced to reckon with the world when they are separated from their family and must relearn how to live. Really sounds interesting. And what I really love about these curated book boxes is that I had never heard of Out of Darkness or Blackout or Aquarium, and they all sound really interesting to me, and I'm really looking forward to them. So I may experiment with some more in the future, but I'm going to take a little break for now. And let's do the opening of Aquarium, which is, suppose I stretched my socks up over the knee. Suppose you saw what fine calves I have. Suppose that the skirt above those same fine calves billowed out like a bell. And I'll suppose even that you followed my movements as I rose from the chair and began to walk. Let's suppose. Would you have said something like, doesn't that deaf girl have beautiful legs? Yes, definitely, that's what you would have said. As if I were a grasshopper with my ears affixed to my legs. Because in an instant, I was the beautiful deaf girl. All at once, a cardboard sign hung around my neck. A sign that couldn't be taken off. For years, I got used to seeing and not being seen, like a ghost under a sheet. Pull away the sheet and poof, nothing. Vacant eyes staring back at you. But when the sheet was finally removed, my sudden new beauty embarrassed everyone. That's how it was. Adolescence descended upon me like a wave, soaking me, and all at once, I was beautiful. Suddenly, the too wide mouth and the baby fat made others admire me, deaf or not. And that is the opening of Aquarium by Yaara, Shehori. Thank you again. Too bad these pages for the curated book box. Again, I apologize for not doing a more specific unboxing video. Hopefully you understand, but I'm really glad I got to mention them here in this video. Getting into the rest of the book haul, I was given a gift card to Montana Book Company, and actually with it came this sticker, Coffee, Books, and Social Justice, which I love, which was purchased at Montana Book Company. Just wanted to shout that out. The first thing I haven't spent that gift card yet, by the way, so get ready for July, maybe. So last month, I forgot to include a book in my book haul, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honorée Fannone Jeffers. This came out in paperback. Actually, I think it came out in paperback in April, and maybe it didn't get to me until May. I can't remember when it arrived, but whatever, I forgot to include it in a book haul completely. If you follow along, you know that I've been on a total journey with this book. I started reading it on audio back in January and wasn't quite into the audio and wanted a slow experience of it. I really wanted to engage with the text itself. So I put it down, got it from the library, and when it eventually became available for me, I was going through it so slowly and savoring it that it became due. So I decided to return it and wait for the paperback. And now Pride Month kind of interrupted my ability to get back to it. So I'm hoping in July I will pick it up. I put my bookmark in where I had left off from the library. So I'm about halfway through, really looking forward to it. Honorée Fannone Jeffers describes this as a kitchen table epic about Pearl Ailey Garfield and the generations of family that led to her existence. And it's a really beautiful book. I can't wait to get back to this. And since we're doing it for all the other books, I'm going to do the opening of this book as well. We are the earth, the land, the tongue that speaks and trips on the names of the dead as it dares to tell these stories of a woman's line, her people and her dirt, her trees, her water. We knew this woman before she became a woman. We knew her before she was born. We sang to her in her mother's womb. We sang then, and we sing now. We called this woman back through the years to our early place, to our bright shoots rising with the seasons. We know her mingled people, how they started off as sacred hummed verses, and now we go back through the centuries to the beginning of her line, to a village called the place in the middle of the tall trees, and we start with a boy, the child who will change everything on our land. That is the opening of The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honorée Fannone Jeffers, who, by the way, is an amazing Twitter and Instagram follow. So if you don't follow her on those platforms, I would recommend doing it. I think she is really cool. The next book is something of a late addition to this book haul. It's The Secret Life of Albert Entwhistle by Matt Cain. So when we lost Guinness, we got a lot of cards and great sympathy, but we also got a care package from Erica at the Broken Spine. And thank you so much, Erica. She contacted Montana Book Company, and they put together a box and sent it to Joel and me. And that was really lovely. Again, thank you, Erica, so much. And in it was this book, which really sounds like a great book. So I've already started it. I've read the first chapter, and I'm really looking forward to getting further into it. And Joel is listening to it on audio. So we're doing a sort of impromptu buddy read. of it, and maybe by the time you see this video, he'll probably be done, but I'll probably still be working on it because I'm going more slowly with the print book. But it sounds like a fantastic book. It is about Albert Entwhistle. Imagine, he is, I believe, approaching his 65th birthday. He has been working for the Royal Mail. It is set in England. And he has a very routine, everyday life. He is not really known to anyone else, and he likes it that way. But his life is sort of upended when, just before his 65th birthday, he gets a letter saying that he is being forced into retirement, and he doesn't know what he is going to do with his life. Years earlier, he had a romance with a man named George, and he decides that he is going to go out and find George. And along the way, he makes friends and makes some discoveries about life and being open and vulnerable and all of those things. And that sounds pretty much like exactly what I want to read right now, which is why I've already picked it up. And I have read the first chapter, and it is delightful so far. So let me read the opening for you. Chapter 1. Albert Entwhistle was a postman. It was one of the few things everyone knew about him, and it was one of the few things he was comfortable with people knowing. One dark and frosty December morning, he arrived at work, safe in the knowledge that the day ahead would be the same as any other, and exactly the same as it had been for years and years. That's The Secret Life of Albert Entwhistle, which I have already started, and which is so far a delight. And I can't wait to get further along into it and talk to you about where it goes from there. The next book is The Voice at the Back Door by Elizabeth Spencer. Look at this edition of this book. Ludicrous. Ludicrous. It is a Pocketbooks Cardinal edition of this book. The first thing I have to say is that credit for this goes to Scott Eaton, who had shared an article with me on Twitter about this book and sparked my interest in it. This was the book that was recommended for the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1957, but the Pulitzer Board refused, and as a result, no award was given that year. The board claims there was a lack of quality in the books that they were presented, but it is believed, and I'll put a link to the article down below, by many people that The Voice at the Back Door refused to allow white people to feel good about racism or how complicit they are in the existence of racism and systemically racist systems, which is the actual reason that the board didn't want to award it the prize. And one thing that I believe the article points to is To Kill a Mockingbird, which I think is a little unfair. It was the 1961 winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and ways in which that book sort of gives you hope and allows white people to kind of feel off the hook because not everyone is a bad person, and The Voice at the Back Door is apparently much more involved in how systemic racism actually is. And that's no shade on To Kill a Mockingbird, certainly not on my part, because I love To Kill a Mockingbird, but I think it's fascinating. And when I looked into this book, I saw this edition of it. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a fan of these lurid sort of Pulp Fiction covers of books. And this one is particularly wild because this is a serious book and they make it look like a tawdry, like what is happening here? Who's this dude? Why is he staring? I don't even know. So I had to have it and I ordered it. I should have thought it through a little more because now that the book is here, it came with the card where you can order more books from Pocket Books, which I love that it's in there. But I don't know if you can tell, it's a little bit flimsy. So I'm glad I have it because the cover is outrageous, but I don't think this is a good edition of this book to read, and I hadn't thought that part through. So when I do actually want to read this book, I'm likely going to have to track down another copy of it, which is a little annoying. I could make this work. I'm just a little worried that I'm going to damage it. So I'll have to figure that out when I get around to actually potentially reading this book. And if you're wondering what it is about, it is set in Mississippi, and the premise is that all the trouble begins when Duncan Harper becomes sheriff of the town and wants to enforce the law fairly for all citizens in the town, regardless of whether or not they are white and black, which gets him a lot of pushback, particularly from the white citizens in town, and eventually, it sounds like it sets him on a course for some sort of violent retribution for that. It sounds like an uncomfortable book, but it should be fascinating to read, especially in light of that article about it, and because it really ties in with my Pulitzer Prize project. Part 1, A Speeding Car. On a winter afternoon, unseasonably warm, a car was racing over country roads toward town. Dust gushing from the back wheels ran together behind in a dense whirl. On the headlands, the sun cast its thin glare above the sagebrush. It shot through the little pines, the pin oaks, and the new reedy pines, and its touch pained the eye. A large rock of gravel leaped from the wheels and whanged a mailbox. A terrapin, off on 100 years' journey, missed death by half an inch. The car stitched a shallow curve and plunged downward, shivering. The descent was steep as a broom handle. But though the back wheels swayed, the car held the safe track, the ridges between the ruts no broader than the edge of a nickel. And that is the opening of The Voice at the Back Door by Elizabeth Spencer. The next book on my book haul is Notes of a Crocodile. I looked this up earlier. Hopefully I get the pronunciation of the name right. It's Qiu Miaojin. I hope I got that right. If I didn't, please correct me. It is translated by Bonnie Hui. This was one of the selections for the LGBTQ read-along in June and July. It was not the official choice, but I am going to read it. It sounded fascinating. It was referenced pretty heavily in a book that I read earlier this year as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. This is published by the New York Review of Books. Beautiful, beautiful, just stunning cover. And set in 1980s Taipei after the end of the martial law era, Notes of a Crocodile is an LGBTQ classic that follows a group of queer misfits as they come of age in a prestigious university in Taiwan, in a society that does not welcome those who do not conform to the rigid sexual and gender structures of society. The author ultimately committed suicide, which is a little bleak, but I'm very much looking forward to reading this book, hopefully in July, so I get it in before the end of the period for the LGBTQ in translation read-along. The book opens July 20th, 1991. Picked up my college diploma at the service window of the registrar's office. It was so big I had to carry it with both hands. I dropped it twice while walking across campus. The first time it fell in the mud by the sidewalk, and I wiped the mud off with my shirt. The second time the wind blew it away. I chased after it ruefully. The corners were bent. In my heart, I held back a pitiful laugh. And I believe the story is told in sort of interesting ways, like letters. Here we go. This is a postmodern pastiche of diaries, vignettes, mash notes, aphorisms, exegesis, and satire by an incisive prose stylist and major countercultural figure. Really looking forward to that one. The next one was gifted to me for my birthday by my lovely neighbors. It is English Creek by Ivan Doig. Now, this edition is published by Penguin. If you live in Montana, you cannot walk into a bookstore without seeing a display of Ivan Doig's books. He is probably the most famous author from Montana. And for that, again, you just can't walk into a bookstore in this state without seeing a big display of his books and his work. And yet, I've never gotten around to reading any of his work. So I'm really glad I finally have a copy, because mostly I just really didn't know where to start, and I had never taken the time to ask anyone. So this is, I believe, the opening of a trilogy. So if I like it, there are 2 next steps for me already lined up, which is perfect, and it is an autographed copy, which is also nice. And I love these sort of vintagey covers that look like you stumbled into a bookstore in the 80s and picked them up. If you want to know what it is about, it is the summer of 1939 in Montana, and Jick McCaskill is coming of age. Over the course of the summer, he will face a rift in his family and learn about his family's ties to the land they live on. It will be interesting to see if anything Native American is incorporated in this, because as someone who lives in Montana and is familiar with northern Montana, I mean, any part of the United States has an indigenous history, but a lot of Montana has a very specific indigenous history. So it will be interesting to see if the book tangles with that at all. And the opening of this book, it opens with a map. I love a book with a map. That's even better. All right, the first page. That month of June swam into the Two Medicine country. In my life until then, I had never seen the side hills come so green, the coulees stay so spongy with runoff. A right amount of wet evidently could sweeten the universe. Already, my father on the first high patrols had encountered cow elk drifting up and across the Continental Divide to their calving grounds on the west side. They and the grass in the wild hay meadows and the benchland alfalfa all were a good 3 weeks ahead of season, which of course accounted for the fresh mood everywhere across the two. As is always said, spring rain in range country is as if halves of $10 bills are being handed around, with the other halves promised at shipping time. And so in the English Creek sheepmen, what few cowmen were left along Noon Creek and elsewhere, the out east farmers, the storekeepers of gross venture, our forest service people, in just everyone that start of June, hope was up and would stay strong as long as the grass did. That is the opening of English Creek by Ivan Doig. The next two I didn't quite prepare for, so I'm going to rely on the descriptions in the book. But the first one is Woman of Light by Fajardo-Anstine. I have been wanting to read her story collection, Sabrina and Karina, since it came out, and I never got around to it, but I've been hearing really good things about this book, which was just released, and I'm going to read you a little bit of the description from the flap. Luz, Little Light Lopez, a tea leaf reader and laundress, is left to fend for herself after her older brother Diego, a snake charmer and factory worker, is run out of town by a violent white mob. As Luz navigates 1930s Denver, she begins to have visions that transport her to her indigenous homeland in the nearby Lost Territory. Luz recollects her ancestors' origins, how her family flourished, and how they were threatened. She bears witness to the sinister forces that have devastated her people and their homelands for generations. In the end, it is up to Luz to save her family's stories from disappearing into oblivion, which sounds fascinating to me. And Kelly Fajardo-Anstine is an author we saw a lot of when we were in Colorado, because I believe she lives in Colorado. The stories in Sabrina and Karina are set in the area, and this obviously deals with Colorado as well. So it would be interesting to finally get around to reading one of her books. Prologue, The Sleepy Prophet and the Child from Nowhere, The Lost Territory, 1868. The night Fortudez Marisol Ortiz rode on horseback to the northern Pueblo Pardona, a secluded and modest village. The sky was so filled with stars, it seemed they hummed. Thinking this good luck, Fortudez did not cry as she left her newborn on the banks of an arroyo, turkey down wrapped around his body, a bear claw fastened to his chest. "Remember your line," she whispered, before she mounted her horse and galloped away. And that is the opening of Woman of Light by Kelly Fajardo-Anstine. The other one is something I'm hoping to read soon, and may very well, because it sounds like something I would really need as I work through my grieving process about Guinness. Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. With this one, actually, I feel like I can wing without reading you the description on the inside flap. So one of the characters, this one, joins a televised cooking competition and falls in love with a non-binary contestant along the way, and it's about them falling in love and the competition and all of that stuff. And I am really here for an LGBTQ rom-com right now in my present state of being, so odds are good that I will get to this at some point soon. I should have mentioned Woman of Light is published by One World, and this is published by Forever. Here is the opening of this book. I'm going to paraphrase it because there is a curse word, and I'm not a prude about curse words, but my channel was once flagged for language by YouTube for a video in which I did not curse, so I'm really careful about that. So I'm going to paraphrase. Dahlia Woodson might have been bad at marriage, but she could dice an onion like a professional. The first even slices, the cross-hatching, the comfort in how logical and perfect it was. Dahlia had put in the work, onion after onion, until she could create consistent knife cuts every time, until she trusted her hand, her knife without having to think about it at all, fast and efficient and tight. When Dahlia stepped out onto the set of Chef's Special in Burbank, California on a Tuesday morning in late July, she thought about onions. And that is the opening of Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. So those are all of the books that I brought into my library in the month of June. I would love to hear what you think about any of them that you have read. If you have recommendations for ones that I should prioritize or maybe delay, all of that stuff, please let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.